Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this webinar on vaccination passports. I'm Siobhan Benita. I'm a former UK civil servant, and I'm really pleased to be chairing this webinar on behalf of Global Government Forum, a publishing house that serves public servants and civil servants all around the world. And I'd also like to say a big thanks to our knowledge partner today, Vaccination Secure. So in terms of today's topic, as countries emerge from their lockdowns and their different restrictions, the issue of vaccination passports really couldn't be more topical. And some countries are already using passports or their version of passports for domestic purposes, permitting citizens to enter venues, to go to different events where the COVID risk might be higher than usual. And there's also increasing interest in how vaccination passports might be used for international purposes, whether that's travel for leisure, to visit families, or for business purposes. And vaccination passports have the real potential to allow opening up, to get economies going again, while still protecting the most vulnerable and preventing further spread of the virus. But this really isn't easy. And vaccination passports raise some really tricky political questions around equity, around access, around individual choice and the role of the state, but also some difficult questions around technology, the compatibility of multiple systems that might emerge from different countries, international collaboration and recognition of the different systems, security of the information that's being shared, and how data is being stored and shared as well. Now, we have a really great expert panel with us today, and they'll be discussing all of these issues and more. And in a moment, I will introduce each of our panel members. But we will also allow time in this webinar to take questions from you, our audience. We have a brilliant audience with us today from all around the world, so a big welcome wherever you're joining us from. Please do use the Q&A function that you have. You should be able to see that on your screens to at any point message in questions that you have. And once we've heard from our panel members, their opening remarks, we will take as many of those questions as we can and see if we can provide some answers to those. So without further ado, I'm just going to introduce our fantastic 5 panel members today. First, we will hear from Annette Numa. Annette is Digital Transformation Advisor at the e-Briefing Centre in Annette believes that all processes and structures of public services should be accessible and simple for every citizen. Her focus as a digital transformation advisor is to explain the Estonian digitalization experience and to inspire leaders and decision makers alike to create a better tomorrow. Then we'll hear from Stephen Coe, who is Director of the Government Digital Service at the Government Technology Agency in Singapore. Stephen builds high-performing agile delivery teams and has worked on many of Singapore's digital products, including the My Careers Future portal and, most recently, the COVID Health Certs, which we'll hear more about shortly. He's also one of the pioneers of the agile community in Singapore, which now boasts over 10,000 members. Then we'll hear from our knowledge partner today, who is Sandy Porter, and he is co-founder and executive director of Evoco Secure. For nearly 20 years, he has promoted the development and deployment of user-centric identity solutions for online services with governments all around the world. And his work encompasses everything from areas of identity, privacy, security, open banking, blockchain, and so much more. Then we'll hear from Matt Snell, who is Chief Digital Officer at the Agency for Digital Government in Sweden, where he leads work to inspire and manage digital development in the public sector. Recently, Matt's division was assigned the government's lead on Sweden's project to develop a vaccination certificate. And Matt has a long record of development of business with the use of new technology at both national and international levels. And last but definitely not least, we'll hear from Stefan Augsberg, who is Professor of Public Law at the German Ethics Council in Germany. Stefan is an expert in German constitutional and administrative law, as well as the law of the European Union and legal theory. And he served as an advisor to various state institutions and private companies. And in 2016 and again in 2020, he was elected a member of the German Ethics Council by the Federal Parliament. So I'm sure you'll agree we have a really expert panel, so please do take this opportunity to pick their brains and send in your questions, as I mentioned at the start. But now I'm going to hand over to Annette to give us her opening remarks. Thanks, Annette.
So hello to everyone, and thank you for such a nice introduction. I'm sending you very warm greetings, not from Estonia, where I'm originally from and where I actually work. I'm currently in Dubai, where it's very, very warm. So I already had my first experience using my vaccination passport for traveling, because Estonia is the first country in the world who has already issued the card. But of course, from my personal experience, we're traveling for the first time now after 7 months for me. So that there are still issues for international way of using this vaccination passport, and we really need to address these issues. But I also, of course, prepared some of the slides for you, so that to introduce a little better, how has the vaccination passport provided for our citizen here? How is this process like? How is the background working in a way? And of course, also, what are the current plans that we are thinking of also for the future, how to start using this vaccination passport, and how to cooperate, of course, also on international level, because we can't just only deal with these things in internal level, because the main goal is that to open our societies again, so that people could travel and do things as they used to do before the crisis. So I would be happy now to share my screen with you. And I do hope that you all are able to see that. So already, as said before, I'm working as one of the digital transformation advisors, and then especially not only focusing on vaccination passport, but also many other services that Estonia is providing to its citizens for like online services. And of course, thanks to a very high level of technology that we have in Estonia, and as 99% of the services are anywhere working online, and especially when we talk about the medical sector, that might have made it easier for us to implement, of course, also vaccination passport, because the medical records have been working online for more than 13 years already, and we get all of our prescriptions and everything else as well fully by just using our electronic identity cards. And again, this really made this process a little bit easier here. But as a first slide, I actually wanted to show to you this three-pillar slide that I almost show in every of my conference or panels that I talk to. And even like when we talk about the vaccination passports, I think it's extremely important to understand that it has to be based on different pillars, especially when it comes to privacy aspects here. So we are providing to our citizens, no matter if we're talking about I don't know, medical services or court services or taxation, always confidentiality, availability, and integrity aspects. And this is 100% always in place, whatever services we are talking about. And again, our citizens were able to get access to their vaccination passport thanks to the implemented ID cards, mobile ID or smart ID solutions, where they could identify themselves and very securely, and we can be sure that this person was behind of this access as well. And of course, also availability, which provides different authorities the most up-to-date information about how many vaccination doses we have had, so that also hospitals and the central system could communicate between each other, and we use also different data exchange layers such as Erodes in order to do so. And of course, also when it comes to medical records in general, or also vaccine information, then integrity and security has to be provided, and that's why Estonia is also one of the actually the first country in the world. Today there are some of the other ones too, but who uses blockchain on a national level, and especially again in medical sector, where we have the most sensitive data of people. So yeah, just the background here. I mean, that made it easier for us to use the services. But now to get to the vaccination certificate that we have issued to people, I would say this gives the fastest response definitely to COVID-19, as we see the numbers in UK, how many people have been vaccinated, and how the numbers of the COVID cases have drastically decreased. And of course, also in other countries such as Israel or US as well. And definitely it helped us to open to the society once again here. The vaccine card, that is the name of this vaccination passport solution that we provide to people, was already issued since the end of the April in 2021, obviously. and it is fully comply also with the EU Green Certificate, so which is also currently in the discussion on a European Union level. So we can be sure that it matches, and we wouldn't have to start using a different solution to that. Maybe just talking about my own experience here. So after I got my second dose of vaccine, I was just checking my medical record platform in 30 seconds later. When I just like I went to the corridor from my doctor. So I left the room and I took my phone and I was checking this medical records platform, and the vaccination passport was already on my phone with like 30 seconds, less than a minute. And I think this is exactly how fast these things should work. As soon as you have got that, it should be there. But we, of course, also have realized that if different countries have different systems and different like passport certificates that they issue, we need to make sure that if we travel, we can trust these certificates that also other countries are presenting. Again, when I came here to Dubai, I mean, having some of the meetings that they also want to see your vaccination passport, but how can they be sure that I haven't just created this myself? So that's why these QR codes are so much needed. And that's why we have been trying to work together with World Health Organization to also have this kind of global trust network, so that every country should put up a list of trusted medical service providers. And every time that you cross the border, it will make the link that this certificate that has been provided, first of all, the manufacturers are again approved, and also the medical service providers, because there are so many fake like already certificates as well in market, than which we really can't make sure otherwise. But of course, again, as I said, it's fully issued automatically after both of the doses. So as soon as the doctor has just confirmed there and said that the second dose had been issued, so I got the good. And again, as I said, it ensures that that this is very authentic as well there. So this is how it looks like. I received exactly like this. So you see that there is 2 out of 2 doses here. I can see which vaccine I got here. Also, there is QR code. There is my name, my personal code, the birth of dates, and of course, what the date of when was this vaccine. And when I actually got the vaccine dose in a way, and of course also it shows if your vaccination status is completed, or you still need any other doses as well here. So again, and we can download this from the medical platform. So the vaccine card solution, I just put here on a slide a little overview. What are the benefits for different sectors? First of all, the government, citizens, and manufacturers. First of all, to use such kind of solution for the governments, it can help us to quickly spread the information about distribution and vaccinations. And of course, also to make sure that it's authentic, the vaccine supply currently, and the global vaccination data again is like shared in a way. From the citizen aspects, it's very convenient that we can help citizens to travel on a cross-border level, have a very transparent access to different vaccines in a way, and we can make sure that no personal information will be shared, because our goal is not to store this information centrally somewhere, or like to exchange that the different institutions would be able to save this information, but the other way around, so that we would just request this information and it would confirm that I have been vaccinated, but none of my personal information would be shared with anyone else. And then of course also manufacturers, so that they can have the real-time reporting from the last mile here. Of course also to provide early counterfeit and a diversion warning for them, and this is also reliable post-market quality monitoring as well. And just very quickly before I finish here about the ongoing projects and discussions that we have. So the company, GuardTime, who is providing us this vaccine guard solution, they're also working with a COVAX global program, which is specially meant for a little bit less developed countries and middle and low income countries, so that we can specially help these countries. And currently we have piloting period with a couple of African countries, again, to help them with supply chain and just to support this entire vaccination process. So we don't only offer them these vaccination passport, but of course the entire system there. And it helps again to make this entire system much more effective by vaccination campaigns and authentic supply chain management in all different ways. And the discussions that we're currently having on the government level here is, of course, we already, if you have vaccination passports and if you come back to Estonia, which I will be doing at the end of this week, I do not have to stay in quarantine because I'm vaccinated, and this is definitely making people to be more positive about vaccination process, so that you can have these advantages in a way. And then of course we're discussing about the domestic use in a way. So if different kind of conferences or events, music festivals would be also only allowed for people that have been vaccinated. But being very open with you here, so of course it's a very critical discussion, because people might feel that that we are some way like they have to feel that we are not discriminating anyone. So we can only start doing this if everyone absolutely have access to vaccines already, which we already opened. But of course, the first, like some people got their time to get vaccinated at the end of June, which still takes time. So if we would make this kind of domestic rules right now, we would definitely be also violating some of the regulations and so on. So we currently have discussion, but we'll see how this process would go here. So that was just a quick overview how Estonia is currently using this solution, what are the future plans, and definitely what I would say as a sum up here is that it's extremely important to work with other countries, share the best experiences, and to come up with a solution that is globally accepted, because again, all we want to do is to travel again and to use this passport, like to make sure that everyone are safe and sound in a way. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Annette. I mean, that's a really brilliant way for us to kick off, because I think you've set the scene. Estonia are always front runners in any of these kind of issues. It's really good to see a real example of what the passport looks like, how you're using it in real time already. Some of the benefits there that you've set out in terms of not needing quarantine, for example, being able to open up kind of society and travel and the economy. But also you mentioned some of the tricky issues around getting a system internationally that works. You touched on the data issues as well. And I think as well, something that maybe some of our other panel members will come back to, getting even compatibility across Europe as well as kind of across the globe. And then the need to work with countries that don't have the same capacity as well, to make sure that we are all in this together and can be really inclusive. Thank you so much for setting the scene so brilliantly from Estonia. I'm going to go over to Singapore now to ask Stephen to give us some remarks from him. You okay there, Stephen? Can you hear us?
Thank you. Stephen here. Give me a minute. I'm sharing my deck right now. Right. Okay. Hey, good day, everybody. Stephen here from GovTech. So I'm going to talk about the approach we take with regards to COVID-19 vaccination cert, but not just vaccination cert, which also include test certificates, PCR tests, serology tests, and overall of how we use technology to fight COVID. So the backdrop is that somewhere in last year, in April 2020, that we had a peak about 7 days average, about 1,000 case COVID infection. And as of now, as we speak, we do see new variant, a new virus variant, B1617 emerge in Singapore these days. I'd like to talk about a little bit on how we managed to bring it down since last year. Other than we're going to talk about health certs, I'll bring some attention to other technology that we have, like Trace Together and Safe Entry, that actually help us with contact tracing as well. I think it's a good example of how technology can actually help to speed up contact tracing, where we are able to shorten contact tracing from a manual contact tracing of 4 days to about, on average, about 1.5 days, or even shorter. And that really helped to bring down the cases to where we currently are, about 29 cases on 23rd of May due to the new virus variant recently. Apart from safe entry and trace together for contact tracing used domestically, we also have health sets, which is the focus of today's presentation. Okay. So the long and short of that is that the health set is a digital standards that we have developed, and we have open source for private institutions to use, medical institutions to use. So the flow goes like that. When a patient visits a clinic to get a PCR test, or when they visit somewhere for a vaccination center to get a vaccine shot after we complete the two doses of a vaccine, the clinics will actually issue a health cert. So when you have a health cert, it's basically a JSON file, and it's text file, right? If you know what's JSON, and then what the citizens will need to do, you go to notarize.gov.sg to either notarize it if it's a PCR test, or if it's a vaccination cert, you go there, log in with SingPass, and then he will be issued a health cert through his email, to his email account, as well as to his SingPass mobile app. So at the number 2 here, displaying and storing of health cert, this screen here shows the notarized website, followed by the SingPass mobile app, and then you can see the health certs at the second row. Click on it and you will show a QR code. And if you scan on the QR code, it will bring you to the third verifying health certs here. This page here that will show the fields like name and nationality and date of birth, and then the vaccine you have taken, the two dosage, and so on and so forth. Apart from the verification, this entire flow, we have also, because we open source it, so we also work with private companies. For example, like 10 of them actually, for example, like Accredify, AOK Pass, and Tribe ID. So that it can be integrated with their digital wallet solution. As you know, SingPass mobile app is our national digital identity. So for those without SingPass mobile app, they are free to use other digital wallets as well, which will then be able to store, to render the health certs and to share health certs as well. On the verification side, apart from verifying the health certs at the verify.gov.sg, they can also, airport airline can also integrate with Affinity Unifier as a verifier app, because like I said, we have already open sourced the end-to-end the code base. So Affinity is also using it for verification as well. Next page. The technology behind health certs is open attestation. This is basically a framework that we open source in 2018. What it does is that there's a 3-layer of hash that we generate. The first layer of hash is more like the field that the key fields, the value of it, we hash it, and then at the document level we hashed it, and then we bash out a few documents, and then we also hash and then generate a Merkle root. So it helps to issue a cryptographically trustworthy document. Then we anchor it onto the blockchain. The blockchain we use is public and permissionless, public Ethereum in this case. And we actually use this open attestation in 2018 for open certs. Very similar to health certs. The difference is that the schema is different, because open certs is used for educational credential, like certificates, testimonials, and transcripts. And we also use open attestation for trade trust to digitalize a trade document somewhere in 2019. And other countries are also working with us on this as well, on this trade trust, using open attestation. And therefore, when COVID hit us, immediately we decided to use the same tried and proven technology, open attestation, to do the same for a health document, which in this case is PCR test. That was late last year, somewhere in November at the time. And about 2 months ago, we also have a vaccination cert that runs, that's also powered by open attestation. I just talk about the workflow. It's quite simple. Basically, it generates hashes of the document, 3 layers of it. And then there's also a way to check whether the hash is valid or not by checking against what is the hash anchor onto the blockchain. And also, we use a smart contract on Ethereum to store a revocation list, so that we will know that whether this health cert has has been revoked or not. For the issuer of the health cert, we use a DNS record, DNS text document as well, to know that this is indeed issued by the right authorized clinics and medical institutions. So this is more detail on what is notarized. So we do have plans to use notarized beyond health certs for all the digital document that is issued by private sector and needed to be officiated by the government, so it can be used brought in overseas. All right, and then verify as well. Yeah. Oh, over here, this is a code base that we have open source for verification, which Affinity is using. Next page here. So this is a QR code. You can take a phone and scan this QR code, and it will be able to bring you to verify.gov.sg. So basically, there are 3 parameters in there when you scan this QR code. The first parameter is verify.gov.sg. That is the URL to render the health certs. The second parameter is the location of the health cert, which is in this case, it is another URL as well. But this health cert is encrypted. So at the third parameter, which is the last parameter, is basically the key to decrypt the payload in order to render on verify.gov.sg. So 3 parameters there. So that when you generate this QR code from an e-wallet, it's actually dynamically, so instead of static. But of course, if for digitally who are disinclined, who use a printout, then it will be a static QR code. If not, if it's an e-wallet, every time you click on it, it will generate a dynamic QR code, and then for one-time read, and then you should remove that payload. We have also open source our e-wallet implementation over here as well, and that's the reason why we have health certs providers, or like even we are talking to IATA and Common Pass to see to integrate to use our library to store health certs in their digital wallet as well. So we have 10 providers here. So as you can see, these 10 providers, they use our open source library like Open Attestation, and they provide a service to medical institutions such as labs, clinics, and all that for commercial interest all over 30 or more than 30 countries and cities, and definitely more than 400 institutions all over the world. So if you are interested to issue health certs, you can actually approach any of them, and they will be able to help you with the issuance. That's all I have. Thank you very much. I hope this is helpful.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Stephen. It is helpful. I think what's really interesting with our first 2 presentations is that you've also given us a sense of Singapore, like Estonia, being very kind of capable in terms of digitalizing services, so really ahead of the game in this. So there's 2 examples of passports that are already up and running and being used. I think lots of similarities there, you were saying, in terms of the system, to make sure that it's secure, that everything can be verified, to minimize fraud using blockchain technology, all of those kind of things. I like the fact that, you talk a lot about the open source nature of what you're doing there, and how private providers can then get involved in a way that the public can still trust. And I think that's something other countries maybe aren't in the same space, maybe, as Estonia and Singapore on some of these issues. So it'd be really interesting to see now how our other speakers who are more from the European side of things take this over. So I am going to invite Sandy now. Thanks, Stephen. Thanks so much. Sandy, over to you.
Hi. Sandy here. I've worked extensively, as I said, in the identity and attribute space, and very much see that the digital passport is just simply another attribute in terms of what's going forward. One of the big problems I think we see out here at the moment is we don't have a defined and agreed problem to solve. Each country's looking at it. Are we dealing with travel? We're dealing with domestic. The daily requirement in the UK almost changes. It depends upon new variants, what's happening, what the view is on different vaccinations. I've seen in the UK, certainly, more COVID passport solutions floating around the number of hot dinners I've had. I mean, every technologist, nearly every company has come up with some sort of solution. But I think we can learn a lot of lessons maybe from the payment solutions. One of the things that's happened in the payment world is it's incredibly simple You know, I can go to almost any country, put a card in a machine, tap in a code, and I get an answer of getting my cash out of there. They do identify, verify on a transaction basis, and it moves forward very, very seamlessly. If we're going to internationalize it, we actually need to do something very, very similar. Next slide, please. So really, if we're starting on it, I think it's very important. Seeing exactly what Singapore have done is a very good space. I mean, ePass, mobile device is key. Cold pass, paper format is absolutely key. Maybe one thing they haven't done is wearables for the young at Glastonbury. They all dump their smartphones because they don't want to lose them. So wearables could be very powerful. I think we can go through QR code, Aztec codes are key in this. You've got to be able in a lot of instances, maybe to connect back to services. And that may well be when I leave the UK, there's a connect back, and maybe I go to Paris and they've relied on that trust that there has been a connect back. There's a lot of privacy issues globally. If we create a network and everyone's connecting, I think there'd be huge resistance to that. Key with this is it's got to be easily readable. So a smartphone device in a corner shop in the UK, be able to read the code. This can't be just reliant on going through Heathrow or any other major in-store where, yeah, they can put in expensive kit. Next slide, please. This for me is the UK. Current position. I actually signed up for this, so this was the screens of me signing up. I have knocked out some of my details in terms of on there. The NHS app has been enabled. It's not a bad solution. The problem I see with it is 7 steps. So imagine me at the departure kind of gate, trying to get my passport sorted. I've got to get connectivity. I go through 7 steps of doing it. The onboarding wasn't particularly easy either, but it is important for our government to put out a solution that is free, is highly usable in terms of a first step. Can be saved to PDF and it can be saved to paper. But a question mark I've got is, 7 steps is a serious question on terms of speed. Next slide, please. So I think the key for me and where I look at it, and on the right is a bit of work we had previously done. Google and Apple have wallets out there. I mean, British Airways, Lufthansa, whoever, push your boarding card to it. It's really low friction. We have to think about the average user. If you have wallets with tons of attributes, connectivity, you're going to reduce support. In the UK, we've got a population of 60 million and a lot of them travel. So there becomes major support issues. You've got speed at checkout at borders. And users now are really suffering app fatigue. I mean, how many apps do people have on their phones? How many do they actually use? So really, really think about it out there. The wallet is there. So in that case of a boarding pass, I mean, the QR code embedding the detail within the ticket itself is absolutely a cornerstone of moving forward. Why spread it? Why separate it? Let British Airways, let Lufthansa, let any of the others pull that together. Next slide, please. An area that I've done quite a lot of work in is then that ticketing sort of side. On the right was one of my last Rolling Stones concert tickets, which I've used here. I mean, 100,000 people went to that event. Can you now get 100,000 people into Twickenham or the Millennium Stadium or elsewhere to watch the Rolling Stones? They need to be close. It needs to be economic in terms of pulling that together. So A, you have to embed it, and B, actually, you need to make things easy. Now, the UK's got an interesting development. 75% of our population use online banking. 97% have a bank account. If you simply look at the COVID test or the COVID vaccination as being an attribute, actually follow that, identify and verify on a transaction basis. You could simply link it onto the payment, the sign in from the bank. I use my mobile banking every day. It may not be the most perfect app, but suddenly I go out there, I buy, I pay, I use through that. Link that and bring it together. That would revolutionize both for domestic venues, international airline ticketing, make it really, really simple. I think it also works then. What you're looking at is this can be pushed to the ePass mobile device. It can also be printed out. Next slide, please. So I think part of this is, and where we look at it, you know, I've come from, in the early days, linking across and working with UK military and others. I mean, the natural inclination is biometrics, really make sure it's highly secure. But I tell you, if I go through Heathrow and I'm threatened with a 15 grand fine or a 6 months in jail, I'm going to behave myself. Yeah, there'll be 1 or 2 people who don't. But the vaccine itself isn't necessarily 100% effective. A passport won't be absolutely perfect. But there are ways other than making it difficult, because friction, usability, and interoperability will be the major issues. Users in the UK Government Verify program, we found in the identity, when they had the option, a huge number dropped out. And it was friction and it was usability that absolutely killed him. So you've got to look at it that way. And any COVID pass has got to be multi-channel. It's really got to cover the globe. I've worked in over 50 countries, and probably the majority of them I was in haven't got a chance of having a digital solution. So we really, really have to think, if this is going to be something effective globally, that it has to be multi-channel. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Andy. I mean, I like what you say there, that nothing's going to be perfect. I think that's a good place to start. But actually, you can help by making sure it's as simple as possible, as reliable as possible, that it's a system that can be as inclusive as possible. So you mentioned not just digital, but having what you called a cold pass or wearables as well. I really like that. Interesting that you picked up the NHS Act, because I think every country will have its challenges in terms of its domestic kind of system. And I think in the UK, I don't know what our audience think if they're from the UK, but a lot of people don't even know that NHS Act exists, because we have a separate NHS Track and Trace, or it's called the NHS Track and Trace Act. So all these issues, I think, complicate the picture. So thanks very much, Sandy. I'm now going to ask Mats to give us the view from Sweden.
Yes, I will try to give you my perspective of this, and of course the Swedish perspective as one part of the European Union perspective, of course. I'm from the Swedish Agency for Digital Government, and as such, we don't have very much to do with healthcare or anything like that. But as a part of the Swedish system, and of course in charge of the Swedish digital infrastructure, we did get this assignment to work with the vaccination certificate, as we called it. Please, next slide. Well, some of our preconditions. Sweden have about 10 million inhabitants and 21 rather independent regions that are responsible for all medical issues and healthcare. An agreement between the state has been made, and that is a very important condition for us to work with, because as it is right now, the e-healthcare and the healthcare is quite fragmented when it comes to the technical infrastructure, and it relies very much on each and every county's or every region's solution, of course. And to this also comes the fact that 290 municipalities also work with healthcare. So it's a pretty fragmented and distributed or decentralized organization this is. But I think this is also a picture that you can see in many member states in the European Union as well, and in the world as well. So I think the example of Sweden is pretty much the example of anyone in the world. And with that, I want to say that there are it's very hard to come up with the standards. Everyone who's coming up to you, I think Sander mentioned that he has had seen more technical solutions than he had warm meals. Did you say?
Dinners.
I think that goes for me as well. I've been offered so many solutions during this time we have developed our solution. So I could say that if I spend all the time talking to my developers, it would be better as a project manager. But anyway, another precondition for us is that we are quite digital in Sweden, and it's a big country, and we have a long distance to go if we want to go for shopping or anything like that. And we have been able to do a little bit of that more probably than many others during its pandemic. We use digital services very much in Sweden, and most of the agencies, public agencies, has developed different services, and we use digital ID. 8.5 million out of these 10 million do have a digital ID, and that is almost the whole adult population. Also, we do have the situation with 4.5 million people do have digital mailboxes within our infrastructure. So therefore, we have a quite good system to work with and to build this solution of vaccination certificates. Next slide, please. We did get this assignment together with the e-health agency and the national public health agency, and we do this development together and build different parts of the system. Our agency is the project manager, and as such, we try to see the holistic view of the system and try to get everything together to one piece. Next slide, please. So this is about the process and solution of ours. We have already built the infrastructure and the solution ready with the vaccination certificate. And now we are looking at the negative test and the recovery certificates. At first, we do have the vaccination that is taken care of the 21 regions. And that is a program running right now, and it's a national program which is set out to have all these regions vaccinate the people. And I think we have a quite good rate right now. We are about 45% of the population has got the first shot already. And all these vaccinations are registered to the National Register of Vaccination. And from that, we draw the information about the vaccination and the people who request this COVID certificate. So this is made with the condition to have a request from the vaccinated person in order to not store the certificates. We do issue this certificate to the person, and the person gets it to their device or whatever storing they choose to have, maybe this digital mailbox, and also it's possible to print out on a paper form. The certificate is quite safe. It goes with a cryptographic code, and we do have this key system with private and public keys. And everything is done according to the European trust framework and according to the, I hope now, almost decided legislation on this on the European level. And the person can choose any format they want, and they can use it for travel as they wish, hopefully within the European Union, and get it accepted everywhere. So this is about how it is done right now. We are looking at the possibility now to make certificates for tests and for recovery also. This is not as easy as we see it with the National Register of Vaccination as a source for data for the vaccination certificate. Now we need to go to each and every test lab to get the data, and we think that they need to produce almost a ready certificate, which will be in sort of notified or stamped by the digital stamp of ours in order to issue it for use within the European Union. I can say that for us it has been a very good development. This is a completely it's done by ourselves, so we haven't had it sourced out to any company or anything like that. It comes with, we use very much of the technologies and so on that we use for other things, and we reuse, of course, the solutions within our infrastructure as is with the digital ID and so on. We are quite good in phase with the regulations within the European Union. We took part of the pilot tests just a week ago. And that was very good result for us, but it showed also that other countries may have problems or at least challenges to come up with the solutions in time for when the act is in use. Mm-hmm. And we will probably see a number of member states within the European Union that will not be up and running with a complete standard of European Union. But the good thing with the European Union standard now is that we have a lot of member states within the European Union that can use this, and of course it will be possible for any nation or any other sort of global constellation to take part of this and join it, of course. So I think this is a very powerful standard, because I think to have things standardized like this, it's a great challenge. It's a really, really great challenge, because we could see a great challenge on the national level, and of course it's very much more difficult on the international level, as we can see.
Brilliant.
So this is about it.
Thank you, Mats.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. I think what you've posed there is just how challenging it is, not just, as you said, at national level, but when you're dealing with the European Union as well. Not all countries are at the same level in terms of their capability and capacity, but also you mentioned they're within a country. Some of the public health information, the medical information is very decentralized as well, so that adds another layer of complication. One final thing I think which might come up in the questions from the audience is I think you've all touched on how useful it's been for developing these, where you already have digital IDs for your citizens, and that's not the case in some countries. So I think we might find countries falling into two categories, those that have that already and those that don't, and it might be that poses different challenges as well. Thank you so much, Mats. And last but definitely not least, Stefan, who I think is going to introduce a slightly different perspective, more on maybe the ethical side rather than the technical side as well. Thanks, Stefan, over to you.
Thank you, Siobhan. Thanks for the invitation as well as the introduction. So it's an interesting order that you've put us in here today, because these interesting the presentations that we just listened to by my esteemed colleagues, they were focusing on the technological solutions to the problem. And you could argue that, well, before we do that, we should ask ourselves whether it is ethically as well as legally possible or advisable to do so. But luckily, as the organizers know, I'm not here to spoil the party. I'm all for it, and I'm happy that we have these esteemed colleagues here to actually talk us through some of the technical difficulties. My use of the term vaccination passport is a rather loose one. So I basically use it for the documentation of the status of having been vaccinated or against or recovered from COVID-19. So it's a certificate a passport, a documentation. And keeping that in mind, you can see that already from that terminological problem, it's a very complex ethical as well as legal topic. I am a lawyer, I'm an academic, and I'm trying to come to you from that side. So I will argue my case in 10 points, and I take these 10 points from an article written last May by Natalie Kofler and Francois Baylis and published in Nature, and they called it 10 reasons why immunity passports are bad. And I don't think that holds true. At least it doesn't hold true any longer. So number one is COVID-19 immunity is a mystery. And as of now, as we know now, that is obviously not true. And I think that even in May last year, speaking of a mystery was, to say the least, ill-advised. Rather, we can perceive of it as a lesson in epidemic epistemics. Given that absolute certainty is a mirage, fixating on it is either naive or futile. Even worse, this specific mindset could result in paralyzing, counterproductive, and dangerous effects, not only for individual freedoms, but also for the collective protection against infection. Therefore, we must demand a degree of epistemic certainty that would hardly be required. We must not demand a degree of epistemic certainty that wouldn't be required or acceptable in other social contexts. We do need normative coping strategies instead of illusionary or defeatist demands. So what we do need is avoiding the certainty fallacy. That's what Sandy said as well. Second reason, serological tests are unreliable. Once again, I think it is important to stress that there is a significant difference between the fact that there are uncertainties and the assumption that this means nothing can be done. The concept of reliability is not just dependent on the scientific soundness, but also demands normative interpretation and implementation. Third reason, the volume of testing needed is unfeasible. So I'd say this didn't really age well, did it? So even a few weeks ago, it seemed highly improbable that rapid tests would be so easily available in stores as they are now. The prices are falling. The market took care of that as well as it did with regard to PPE. What we do need is a cohesive testing strategy. And that is something that cannot be developed and delivered by market forces, but that needs state intervention. Fourth reason, there are too few survivors to boost the economy. From a legal as well as from an ethical point of view, small numbers don't indicate irrelevance. Quite on the contrary, it is one of the most significant functions of fundamental rights to protect minorities and those that go against the grain. For that reason, it is simply in line with the principle of proportionality to allow broad-based constrictions on freedom only where there are no more specific and precise instruments. Correspondingly, infringements on individual liberties must stop where the underlying rationale no longer applies, as is the case with regard to people that have recovered from COVID or are vaccinated against it. Fifth reason, monitoring erodes privacy. I would say that quite the opposite is true. Monitoring ensures freedom. Scientific scrutiny should be a mandatory requirement in order to ensure that the effectiveness of the fight of the pandemic is not compromised. Privacy is not an absolute right. Data protection laws challenge vaccination passport, but do not render them impossible. Sixth reason, marginalized groups will face more scrutiny. Firstly, this is based on the false assumption that these groups will have no equal access to vaccines. That is something that is at least doubtful with regard to how the vaccination campaign was rolled out. Secondly, there are reports that marginalized groups are affected much more intensely and dramatically by COVID than the rest of society. Should this be true, and the indications are there, then we have a duty to protect them, for example, by communication strategies that are better tailored for different communities. Seventh reason, there will be unfair access. Most states have made great strides in order to come up with a system of allocating vaccines that is based on the principles of fairness and non-discrimination. These systems do have their flaws, but there are serious attempts to develop an equitable mode of distribution. And on the contrary, upholding wide-reaching restrictions, even for persons who lack even the potential to be infectious, stands in stark contrast to the most basic standards of ethics as well as constitutional law. Furthermore, keeping everyone in conditions of relative unfreedom doesn't help people who have not been vaccinated against or recovered from COVID at all. Eighth reason, societal stratification will be intensified. In Germany, as well as in other states, the vaccination distribution is based on vulnerability, not on social differences. Therefore, facilitating a return to normal social life will affect the most diverse groups of people. However, we need to be careful how we proceed from here now that the initial phase of prioritization comes to an end. Ninth reason, there will be new forms of discrimination. I think this is one basic argument that we know from other situations, from other arguments, especially with regard to bioethical questions. It's a slippery slope argument. It has been misused over and over again in the past. And I think this is another example. It also shows a distinct lack of both understanding of and trust in the legal system. While we are constitutionally obligated to ensure personal liberties, we're also forbidden to discriminate against individuals or specific groups. However, differentiation does not automatically mean discrimination. Formal equal treatment doesn't imply equity. 10th reason, last reason. Threats to public health need to be avoided. I think this holds true only for immunity certificates, not for vaccination passports. Rather, with regard to the latter, incentives are urgently needed in order to convince a large percentage of the populace to take part in the vaccination program. I think that's something that we're already seeing, especially with regard to the United States, that there is a specific tendency to withdraw from the program, to not take part in the program, especially with regard to the second shot, and vaccination passports might be an important incentive here. Thank you so much.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Stefan. I mean, you've introduced so many new issues there, some of which have already come up, I think, in the questions, especially we'll come back to that in a minute, the United States, and maybe some of the reluctance from politicians there to engage in this process. But I'm just conscious of how much we've got to get through in so little time. So we go straight to audience questions. We've had a lot of questions coming in. So thanks to our fabulous audience. I'm going to take two sets of questions together and put them to you so you can answer one or both of these sets of questions. So we've had questions in around fraud and the possibility of the system being abused. And I know some of you have touched on this, but both from Dr. Russell Smith in Australia and also Barry Meredith in Canada have asked different questions around fraud. How can you minimize the risk of fraud in an international system? With particular things like people maybe lying about the type of vaccine they've taken, whether it's not an approved type of vaccine, or just not having taken the vaccination at all. So how can we, that's one set of questions, how can you minimize fraud in a system? And the other question is around equality and choice, which some of the issues you raised there, Stefan, I think about marginalized groups, people who choose not to have this vaccine. So we've had from Maureen in Canada and from Jennifer in Canada as well. What about people who choose not to have the vaccine, either because they cannot for medical reasons or because they just have fear of this vaccine because it's been developed so fast? So people who themselves choose, how should they be treated in this system? And some of you touched on the issue of tests as well, but then that maybe is more complicated if you're looking at an international system. I'm going to shake up the order a little bit, but I know we haven't heard from Annette and Stephen for a while. So Stephen, I'm going to come to you first, then Annette. Stephen.
Hi, yes. On the topic of folks who are not vaccinated, in Singapore, we don't discriminate against them, but we do understand there will be a higher risk of admitting them into certain events, and therefore they will have to go for additional tests, PCR test or ERT test, sorry, before they enter this kind of high risk events. Yeah.
Great, thank you. So that's on the issue of if they haven't been vaccinated. Did you have anything to say on the issue of fraud, how you minimize fraud? I know you talked quite a lot about the security of your system. Annette, I'm going to come to you because I think Stephen's got some internet connections. So on fraud and on the kind of choice issue.
So starting from the fraud side again, the infrastructure needs to be secure first of all, like in the first point in a way, and we have been especially investing again on the methods, how do we exchange information, the encryption there, the blockchain that we use in order to store this information and so on, and just by but you brought it out like when people would be lying about the vaccine dose that they got or something, like it's kind of impossible here, I would say, because again, that the doctors are confirming that from the online system. They are the ones that are like behind that scene there. So it seems to me a little impossible. Of course, there could be methods that people could just like be faking this this document in a way, but of course at the same time, how can you make a new QR code there that doesn't, like, if you scan that, then it wouldn't make a link to make this confirmation site there. But now to talk about like just that about people who wouldn't want to be vaccinated, or again, because we still have people that can't be vaccinated because of their like the medical situations in a way, then of course it has to be think through in a way. I mean, there is not much that we can do with people that can't be vaccinated because of the health reasons. We might issue just some kind of other certificate that would say, I would be happy to get vaccinated, but I can't do that again, I don't know, by the QR code or something. But at the same time, the people that are scared about that, I think it's a lot to do, as especially I work for the government sector, to like organize different campaigns and just talk about these things more openly, and to make sure that we wouldn't have too much like this and misinformation about vaccines online, which is a very, very, very big problem at the moment here. I have heard so many weird stories about vaccination just from social media, what people come up with, and we really need to openly talk about these things, and at the same time we should have this communication on platforms that people usually spend their time, and people that are very trusted should be the ones that are talking about these things. And of course, especially even if there is some things that go wrong in a way, or there is some medical issues later on that people that have been vaccinated are facing, we need to also talk about this openly in media, because otherwise there would be even more questions raised, and we really can't afford that. So it's just definitely being very transparent, open with everything, talking to people, talking about the risks and everything is essential, but at the same time bringing out very positive examples. And when I usually want to promote vaccination to my friends, then I just show them some kind of statistics about, again, UK, and I guess you have been super successful with this, and at the same time also a couple of other countries, to show what's the impact, and I feel also much safer in a way.
Thanks, Annette. So definitely using good communication to counter some of the fake news and some of the conspiracy theories, really important. Stephen, you're back with us, which is great.
Yeah. Sorry.
I heard what Annette said there about minimizing fraud and the security of the system, but in Singapore, is that something you agree with, that it's quite hard to fraud the system you have?
I think that definitely is important, because in order to maintain trust. But when it comes to fraud, there are primarily three ways people can put it off. Number one, tamper with the content, right? Number two, the provenance. How do you know it's issued by the right authorized clinics that you recognize? And number three, how do you prevent someone from using someone else's vaccine cert and masquerade and spoof it, right? So the technology, whichever technology you have to address these three possibilities. So that's the reason why for us, when develop health certs, number one, prevent tamper-proof, you generate a hash, and you check against the hash against the blockchain. So that's one. Number two, provenance. We have a wide list of authorized clinics who can issue, and then based on their keys, right, that they issue and sign on the health certs, we know that these are actually a legit issuer. And number three, that is actually an identity problem, and you do need a national digital identity. For our case, we are very fortunate we have SingPass, and with that, you need a robust digital wallet, like biometric and or etc., that can verify who you are, and you're not using someone else's cert. But without that, then a compromise would be you check against the passport number against on the cert, as well as against the actual passport, to prevent spoofing. Yeah.
Brilliant.
So these are the areas to look at.
Lots of kind of checks and balances in place. Thank you. Matt, I'm going to come to you on the fraud and choice issues.
Yeah, on the fraud issue, I believe that we have a safe solution, enough safe and secure for the purpose. It's built on the European Trust Framework, which relies very much on Swedish framework for the same reason. And we do have all this, the whole system is built on strong and secure levels of trust when it comes to digital IDs and so on. So I think that is quite safe. It's quite hard for anyone, or even for a professional to make a copy or make something that would work for the time that you want to use it. And as I said, you need to request a very specified certificate for the moment, and then later on it's a new one, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then we can also see the issue of inclusion and so on. If someone cannot have a vaccination, it's possible, of course, to use test results as well for a certificate. If they cannot do that, or if they don't want to do that, and if they want to, if they have a vaccination done, they can also go. If they don't have an ID, a digital ID, we have alternatives for them as well. So we support people to get a printout or anything like that in agencies of ours.
Brilliant, thanks.
And also we will have a special hackathon this October on the theme of digital inclusion, and that goes in line with this.
Yeah, brilliant, thank you. Sandy, I'm going to come to you on fraud and choice. And also somebody's asked, why can't existing passports just be updated to include a COVID vaccination stamp? But I think that's what you were saying, that they should be on the boarding pass, included on the
and I agree, read the passport, quite interestingly, and one of my old passports had a fantastic visa for Lebanon, and it always struck me, why don't you just stamp the passport for a paper one? The problem with that is the effort and cost. So I think all of them's a balance around that. So I think all of these are feasible. The visa system is there for stamping passports. You could easily do that. On the fraud one, I still stick by, there was a saying from some of the military guys during the Cold War, etc. Data flow, it's only a matter of time before it's compromised. So the level and effort and the value of it within any of these systems, everything, it's feasible if you put enough effort to compromise it. What's the interest? Well, I think my original comment is a £15,000 fine or 6 months in jail is a very good deterrent for 99.99% of people not to go down that line, the value. I do think on the inclusion is important. If somebody can't have the vaccine, actually that's part of a caring society. You know, we take a risk, we look after them, whether we use tests or so, and that's part of a risk. If somebody won't have the vaccine, well, you know, when I had my yellow fever shot and I had to go into some places that were pretty risky, that was my choice. I wasn't going to get in if I didn't have all those shots. So I think you make those sort of choices in life, and that's part of our overall social, interactive human tribe. You know, part of this is looking after each other.
Thanks. Stefan, I'm going to add when I ask you, because I think more on the choice side, somebody has said with new variants coming along all the time, do you think there's a legal and ethical justification, if we need to, for requiring kind of mandatory passports, even for domestic, not let alone international use?
It's an interesting question, thank you, because it somehow reverses the situation that we're having here in Germany, at least at the moment. Although the shops are starting to open again, most restaurants, for example, are still closed. Or I think last weekend it was possible to eat outside again, have a warm meal outside again, that we've been deprived of for so many months. So in basically, I would say that that's exactly the situation we have now, or at least that I would hope that we had now. So I'd be very happy if I were vaccinated and be able then to go out into a restaurant, a theater, whatever. At the moment, I can't do that. Even those that have been vaccinated are deprived of some very basic liberty. And so
you're you're kind of switching the default, which is saying without it, you're...
I think the default should be that basically, if you are no longer a threat, then everything should be open. And on the contrary, if it's the case that even it's a small statistical probability, but you are still a possible threat, then of course the basic legal reaction might be to treat you as a possible risk, and therefore, because we just don't know any better, close down business, close down public institutions, whatever. But with regard to everything else, with regard to fraud, and especially with this digital inclusion, I think I'm very much of the same opinion as Sandy, for example. I think it's important to note that we are a risk-averse society, but we are not a society that can avoid risk at any cost. And so there will be fraudulent behavior, as there is in any other aspect of life. And there will be a problem of discrimination. There will be problems with regards to people who cannot be vaccinated or who don't want to be vaccinated. I think it's important to differentiate between the two sets of people. So children, for example, that we can't give the vaccine yet to, of course we need to offer them something, or pregnant women or other parts of society. But those that just simply don't want to do it, I think we can safely assume that their voluntary non-participation is of value too.
Thanks. I'm really conscious of the time, and I want to get in one more round of questions if I can. So if you bear with me, we might run over by a couple of moments. Just to say thank you to the audience. You've been fantastic. You've sent in so many questions. We can't get through them all, but don't worry. Some of them you've directed at individual panel members. We will ask for those to be answered after the webinar. So you should get an answer, if not now live, then we will try and answer those anyway for you. And also to say a feedback survey has just been sent out to audience members. Please do take a few minutes to fill that in if you possibly can. It helps us make sure we give you the kind of webinars that you really find useful. So thank you for that in advance. So my final two questions to the audience, and I'm afraid we'll have to kind of go through the answers quite quickly. We've had a couple of questions in from audience members in America saying that in different states, depending on the politics of those states, there seems to be increasing reluctance by politicians to actually consider the idea of vaccination passports for domestic purposes and international purposes as well. So what are your thoughts on that? And what do you think in particular, how much might that damage a kind of international system if you have a big player like the United States reluctant to take part in the system? And then my final question, which then feeds on from that, is how optimistic are you that we are close to getting a system internationally that works so that we can get back to kind of travel and business around the world? So those are the two questions, the kind of American reluctance and impact on the international system, and how optimistic are you that we'll have a system soon that works? Matt, so I'm going to ask for your thoughts on this first.
I was a bit surprised to get the first question here.
Sorry, Matt, I took you by surprise.
Well, since we are in a group of member states of Europe, and that we do think that the European regulation is really coming on soon, I think we will have this system of ours in operation for the 1st of July, because that's what they have said from the European Commission, and that's what they have promised us in Europe. So I think that will come up, but I think some member states will come behind because there will be a 6-week period of time they can implement this.
Great, thanks. And do you think the politics is going to be difficult for some countries who are less kind of engaged in this?
Yeah, of course. And there are so much politics about this, and there's so much interest in this, even in Sweden. So when you come to talk about opening Sweden up or do anything else with the certificates and so on, there will be discussions, and there are already discussions regarding the inclusion and so on. So it's a political question, very hot.
Yeah, thanks. Sandy, over to you for your thoughts on this one. I need to get you off mute, Sandy. Thanks.
Apologies. I think we're well on a good road, but I think it's going to be pretty bumpy. The the problem I see at the moment is this is a very developed world kind of solutions we are tending to push out there. And the majority of the world perhaps won't be vaccinated, and there will be a struggle. So I think the focus, we have to think sort of wider from that sort of side on the politics. So over the next year, I think we'll do pretty well, but then I think the challenge gets much bigger in terms of it truly being global. On the politics side, we elect the politicians, I think, in a brutal way. If you don't want to play, we've already seen airline travel virtually come to a standstill, which we never believed would happen. The same could happen to countries who won't play ball. And I think for those that are working together, European Union is a very powerful bloc. You potentially get Asia Pacific or others as powerful blocs. If America is swung in that direction or parts of it, the risk for them is they become isolated rather than the other way around. I think that's where the risk sits.
Thanks, Sandy. And it might be that it's within a country, so it might be that states within America have difficulties as opposed to.
And that's a federal versus, and we've seen this for identity, state driver's licenses. So very difficult for US like UK to come up with an identity system for different reasons.
Thanks. Stephen, how optimistic are you that we will soon have an international system up and running?
At least based on my interaction with other countries, because the fastest way to travel is to have a bilateral agreement at this moment. At the same time, doesn't preclude the multilateral approach. Seems like I think it's going to take quite a while, because the risk appetite, the ability to contain the COVID infection rate in various countries is really very, very uneven. And there has been a lot of hopes about vaccination. And I wouldn't say it's wrongly placed, but at the same time, based on what happened in other countries, the variant and all that, it has proven that it has breakthrough quite a few times, and the vaccine doesn't prevent transmission. It does definitely, is effective, right? But it doesn't prevent transmission. It's actually more protecting self, to a certain degree protecting others, but more protecting self, right?
Yeah.
And then at the same time, there is still a lack of ability to do automated contact tracing to contain the outbreak in many countries, apart from speeding up vaccination. With all this, then I'm not very optimistic that we're going to have an international system for safe travel, at least over the next 1 year. Yeah, okay. Probably on a smaller scale, on a bilateral agreement, but not really at the international level.
Okay,
yeah. Over.
Thanks very much. Stefan, are you any more optimistic than that, or do you agree with that assessment?
I don't know. I'm rather an optimistic person in general, but I think maybe not soon, but soon-ish, I think we'll have a solution. But Sandy's of course completely right that it's a first world problem that we're solving here, and it's also a transition technology, because once enough people are vaccinated, the importance of vaccination passports sinks dramatically. So I think that's important also to keep in mind. That with regard to the political question in the US, I think it's understandable that in some parts of the US, especially citizens who don't travel at all, might be reluctant to take part in a vaccination program. In general, I think we should take that seriously. But also, I think if we are able, for example, within the European Union, to come up with a suitable solution, and I'm very much encouraged by all your talks today, then that might serve in order to show them the benefits of such a program. Thank you.
Thanks. Annette, in 30 seconds, we started with you. I'm going to finish with you. How optimistic are you?
Very optimistic, but at the same time also a little concerned, because seriously, I'm not going to lie, it very much worries me what we see also in US at the moment, that there are still states that are very concerned about this like a vaccination passport and think that this is fully discriminating people and so on. I don't agree with that, but I fully also agreed with Sandy that these countries that are going to say fully no for that will be isolating themselves in one point. And when we see a positive example from the European Union's vaccine certificate, then definitely this can inspire others also to follow the same road. And I do still think in a very positive way that also it helps us to not to spread the virus, and there are so many new researches about this as well, and let's just hope that we can finish this crazy time and end this crazy time, because we all want to return back to normality.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. I'm really sorry that we're out of time. As I said, we will get to answer all those questions for you behind the scenes. I'd just like to say a huge thank you to our brilliant panel, to Annette, to Stephen, to Sandy, to Mats, who has had to just duck out, and to Stefan. Thank you so much for giving us so much of your time. To everybody watching, we will be sending around a recording with a link of this, so you can share it with your colleagues. You can watch bits of it if you missed any of it. And we will also share an article with some of the key themes that emerge from this in the next week or so. And I'd also like to thank again Avoco Secure for being our knowledge partner today, and Sandy for giving us his thoughts as well. Thank you to all of you. I think we ended on a bit of a cautious note there, but as Annette said, you know, let's hope that the end hopefully is in sight. And I think what we've learned today is it's not probably the technology that's the hardest thing, it's more the kind of politics and some of the cultural issues that are going to be the biggest challenges facing us in future. Wherever you are, have a really good rest of the day, and I hope we see you at another webinar again very soon. Thank you, everybody. Thanks a lot.